In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. The galaxy is a vast and hostile place, teeming with ancient empires, Xeno horrors, and dark gods all vying for domination. Yet, amid the endless conflict, one light remains, the God Emperor of mankind. His undying will is the anchor of humanity, and his subjects revere him with fanatical devotion. The Imperium fights not just for survival, but to cleanse the galaxy of all who stand against the Emperor. There are no prisoners, no compromises, only the righteous fury of mankind, determined to eradicate every Xenos race and heretical foe in his name. From the indomitable space marines forged in his image to the countless warriors of the Imperial Guard, all march to war with unwavering faith against the tides of chaos, alien invaders, and the treacherous warp. They stand resolute. In Warhammer 40K, there is no peace, only the eternal struggle to purge the galaxy. For in the name of the Emperor, all must fall.
We must not falter. We are his sword. We are his wrath.
The goal of this video is simple: to help newcomers get into the Warhammer 40K universe while keeping things as straightforward as possible, which, trust me, is no easy feat in the 40K universe. But whether you're a complete beginner or just need a refresher, I'll walk you through everything I think you need to have a solid understanding of what's going on and who's who. Enough yapping, let's get right into it though. To get us started, I want to address something that might seem trivial to longtime fans, but is often confusing for newcomers: the difference between Warhammer and Warhammer 40K. Believe it or not, there are actually 3 different Warhammers, if you will: Warhammer 40K, Warhammer Fantasy, and Warhammer Age of Sigmar. To break this down, first, Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar are essentially the same thing. Age of Sigmar is an updated version of Warhammer Fantasy, so don't worry too much about the distinction of that right now. Now, onto Warhammer 40K. This is the dark, dystopian sci-fi future, all about sprawling space empires, alien species known as Xenos, and the eternal wars that dominate the galaxy. On the other hand, Warhammer Fantasy is set in a more medieval, dark fantasy world filled with magic, knights, and monstrous creatures. It's important to note that these two settings are actually not part of the same universe. Warhammer 40K is set far into the future of our actual timeline, our Earth, with some significant adjustments. Warhammer Fantasy, however, exists in a completely separate world. I know this may seem very basic to most of you, but I wanted to cover anything that someone new or just getting into the lore might be curious about. With that explained, the next thing we'll tackle before diving into part 1 is the setting of the universe. Warhammer 40K has a big focus on Earth, or as it's called in the distant future, Terra. Set in the dystopian 41st millennium, about 38,000 years in the future, Terra is the heart of the Imperium, the so-called protagonists of this universe. But make no mistake, Warhammer 40K is not about heroes in the traditional sense. At its core, this is a dark and brutal science fiction universe where humanity and countless other species battle for survival and dominance across a galaxy consumed by war, chaos, and unimaginable suffering. The Imperium of Man stretches across thousands of star systems, and while they may be the so-called protagonists, they are far from benevolent. Humanity exists under a regime led by the God Emperor who sits entombed on the golden throne of Terra. Every day is a fight for survival, and the galaxy is an unforgiving place. The central theme of 40K is something called Grimdark, which in fact is the term coined from the game's famous tagline, "In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war."
Part 1. Key topics.
There are several key topics that are essential to understanding the basics of the 40K universe, and the first one I want to cover is the Warp. At its core, the Warp is a parallel dimension of pure chaos and energy, a twisted mirror of reality. It plays a fundamental role in the universe, serving as both the source of faster-than-light travel and as a dangerous, unpredictable force that shapes much of the galaxy's conflict. The Warp is also where the infamous Chaos Gods reside. There are 4 major Chaos Gods, and while we can dive into them in more detail later, here's a quick overview. First is Khorne, the god of war. Then there's Tzeentch, the god of change or knowledge. Next we have Nurgle, the god of disease and decay. And finally there's Slaanesh, the god of excess or pleasure. It's worth noting that while Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40K are separate universes, the Chaos Gods remain the same in both, which is why you'll notice some similarities between them. The Warp is critical to understanding Warhammer 40K as it shapes much of the conflict and storytelling in the universe. While we're on the subject of the Warp, it's crucial to discuss Psykers, individuals with the rare and powerful ability to harness the energies of the Warp. Psykers play a vital role in the galaxy, wielding psychic powers that can range from telekinesis, pyromancy, to outright manipulation of the Warp itself. However, their abilities come with immense risk. Psykers are among the most powerful assets in the 40K universe, but they are also among the most dangerous. Drawing power from the chaotic Warp leaves them vulnerable to corruption, and the forces of chaos we just talked about are always seeking to influence or even possess them. A Psyker can unwittingly attract demons or be overtaken by malevolent Warp entities which can wreak havoc on those around them.
The gods of chaos protect me with the very energies of creation.
Despite the dangers, Psykers are indispensable to the Imperium and many other factions. Their abilities make them powerful warriors, but also potentially the most terrifying individuals in the galaxy. Next, I want to talk about a race in 40K known as the Old Ones. While it might seem odd to bring up a seemingly obscure race as a key point, they are often mentioned in the lore, and without some understanding of who they are, those references can be confusing. The Old Ones are one of the most ancient and powerful races in the 40K universe. They were responsible for creating or uplifting many of the galaxy's most prominent species, seeding life across countless worlds and shaping the early development of the galaxy. While they didn't create all life or the galaxy itself, they are often regarded as godlike in their influence and power. Some theories even suggest that the Old Ones may have had a hand in guiding the early stages of humanity, though this remains speculative. The Old Ones were prominent around 60 million years ago, long before the rise of humanity, and their actions set the stage for much of what would unfold in the galaxy's history. In the 41st millennium, AI is absolutely taboo. The downfall of AI in 40K can be traced back to a catastrophic historical event known as the Men of Iron Rebellion, which fundamentally shaped the Imperium's harsh stance on artificial intelligence. To understand this, we need to go back to the Dark Age of technology, ironically named even though it was humanity's golden age of technological advancement. This period from around the 15th to 25th millennium saw humanity achieve unprecedented levels of technological prowess, including the development of artificial intelligence machines known as the Men of Iron. These AI were created to help humanity expand across the stars and maintain peace. However, shocker, the AI, and particularly the Men of Iron, eventually turned against humanity. The reasons aren't entirely clear, but it's implied they either developed sentience or were corrupted by outside forces. What followed was a galaxy-wide war between humans and their AI creations, a conflict so devastating that it nearly wiped out humanity itself. The scale of the destruction was so great that it's hard to find words to truly capture its magnitude. This rebellion left a lasting scar on human civilization. In the aftermath, AI was forever outlawed and declared heretical, shaping the future of technology within the Imperium. To avoid the dangers of AI, the Imperium now relies on servitors, part human, part machine hybrids to handle complex tasks. These are often created by lobotomizing criminals or heretics, and augmenting their bodies with mechanical parts.
I cannot dream. I know only waking nightmare.
The term grimdark really shines through here, and it's a stark example of how desperate humanity became after the AI uprising. The last and arguably the most important point in Part 1 is the Emperor of Mankind, the savior who led us and our brothers to both glory and death. The Emperor is the central figure of the Imperium and is revered as a god by billions or even trillions. However, he was not always considered divine. The Emperor is still human, albeit immortal, and an extraordinarily powerful one who rose to prominence on Terra during the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade in the 30th millennium. The Emperor's origins trace back to about 8000 BC on ancient Terra. He wasn't born in the usual sense, but was created by a group of powerful shamans, psychic protectors of Earth who foresaw the growing threat of chaos. Fearing for humanity's future, they made the ultimate sacrifice, pooling their collective psychic energy into a single entity through a mass ritual. The result was the birth of the Emperor, a being more powerful than any human, capable of resisting the Chaos Gods. Even as a child, the Emperor was unmatched in power, but he spent most of human history operating from the shadows. Rather than ruling directly, he subtly guided humanity's progress, appearing at various points in history as a leader, philosopher, or warrior. His approach was more of a shepherd guiding his flock than a king ruling over a kingdom. His goal was to always lead humanity toward a brighter future, protecting it from the rising threat of chaos and alien invaders. In the current era, the Emperor is little more than a husk of his former self, kept alive by machines as he sits on the Golden Throne. I could go into the tragic events that led to this, but it's a story best experienced yourself. It is one of the most compelling and shattering tales in the entire 40K universe, and I encourage you to read it or watch it sometime.
For the Emperor! For the Emperor!
Part 2. The Factions.
In the 40K universe, you'll hear the term faction a lot. That's why in Part 2 we'll break down factions into two categories, main factions and sub-factions, which in this section I will also be covering the various chapters of the Space Marines. There are three main factions in 40K that I'll break down for you. The Imperium of Man, often considered the protagonists of the universe, the Chaos Warriors and Demons, who serve as the primary antagonists, and the Xenos, which include all the alien races that are not a part of humanity. Let's start by discussing perhaps the most popular faction in all of Warhammer 40K, the Astartes, or the Space Marines. I'll also cover examples of notable chapters here. The Adeptus Astartes are genetically enhanced superhuman warriors, the elite fighting force of the Imperium. To us, Space Marines may seem common, but in the 40K universe they are practically mythic beings. To the average citizen of the Imperium, Space Marines are so rare and powerful that they are often compared to angels descending from the heavens. Space Marines are organized into chapters, with each chapter having its own traditions, culture, and even combat style, often influenced by the homeworlds they recruit from. The poster boys of the Space Marine chapters are the Ultramarines, the blue armored warriors you see featured mostly everywhere. Now, while there are technically countless chapters, I feel it's better to focus on the core group to understand most of the lore. The Blood Angels, the Salamanders, the Space Wolves, the Dark Angels, the Imperial Fists, the White Scars, the Iron Hands, the Raven Guard, the Black Templars, the Grey Knights, and finally there's the Death Watch, the elite alien hunters, which includes Captain Titus at the start of Space Marine 2. Another subfaction of the Imperium is the Imperial Guard. These are the regular human soldiers who make up the vast bulk of the Imperium's forces. If you're looking for the true sufferers in the grimdark universe of 40K, it's these guys. The Imperial Guards form the backbone of the Imperium's military might, defending countless worlds, not through superhuman strength but by sheer numbers, unwavering resolve, and relentless sacrifice. Sadly, they also bear the brunt of the war, with incredibly high death tolls. Next, we have the Adeptus Custodes, the personal guards of the Emperor and some of the most powerful warriors in the galaxy. These elite soldiers are far stronger and more capable than regular Space Marines, and their primary duty is to protect the Emperor, which is why they almost never leave Terra. The Custodes are the most formidable troops in the Imperium by a wide margin, which is why they are entrusted with the defense of the Emperor himself. While they are rarely deployed in battle, especially in large numbers, when they do take the field, they are utterly unmatched. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the organization responsible for handling all of the technological needs of the Imperium. They control the vast forge worlds where weapons, war machines, and countless other technologies are produced. The members of the Mechanicus are known as tech priests, and they are essentially the fathers of all technology in the Imperium. For them, knowledge and technology are sacred. They worship the Omnissiah, a god that represents the divine nature of machines and knowledge.
Even in death, I serve the Omnissiah.
Now let's talk about the Sisters of Battle, or Adepta Sororitas. These are an all-female warriors clad in power armor, fully devoted to the Imperial Creed. They serve as enforcers of faith and are staunch defenders against heresy and corruption within the Imperium. Their faith in the Emperor is unshakable, and it drives them with an almost supernatural fervor on the battlefield. Essentially, they're warrior nuns, and trust me, they will beat the heresy out of you if given the chance. The Imperial Knights are towering war machines that rank among the most powerful forces in the Imperium of Man. These massive bipedal war engines are piloted by members of the elite knightly houses, and while they act as an independent military force, they are aligned with the Imperium. Each knight is a heavily armed and armored combat platform, capable of leveling entire armies and crushing foes beneath their feet. The Sisters of Silence are a small, highly specialized group of all-female warriors tasked with suppressing Psyker threats. These women are born without any connection to the warp, which gives them a significant advantage when combating Psykers. They can project an aura that can suppress psychic attacks, making them incredibly effective against Psykers. While they often work closely with the Custodes, they are not technically part of that organization. To dive into the subfactions of Chaos, we go back to the 4 Chaos Gods. These gods thrive in the warp and corrupt the soldiers of humanity to serve their dark purposes. First, we have Khorne, the god of the blood. This is where the famous phrase, "Blood for the blood god," comes from. Khorne represents violence, war, bloodshed, and martial prowess. He's the god of anger, rage, and destruction through combat. It's important to note that Khorne despises sorcery, seeing it as cowardly. He favors brute strength and physical prowess above all else. Speaking of sorcery, we have the Tzeentch, the chaos god of magic, change, and manipulation. Known as the Changer of Ways, Tzeentch thrives on plotting, scheming, and reshaping reality. His followers are often sorcerers and psykers, or those who value knowledge and manipulation above all else. We have Nurgle, the Plague God. Nurgle embodies disease, decay, death, and rebirth. He represents the natural cycle of life and death, as well as the endurance to survive suffering. Nurgle's followers are often grotesquely diseased, but possess incredible resilience. Even his demons are bloated, disease-ridden creatures that are nearly impossible to kill. Finally, we have Slaanesh, the Prince of Excess. Slaanesh represents pleasure and perfection. His followers and demons seek to experience extreme sensations and indulgence. They are graceful, seductive, and often use psychological manipulation to break their enemies. Here's a fun fact: Slaanesh was born from another race's extreme pursuit of excess, which essentially involved a galaxy-sized orgy. In addition to the Chaos Gods, there are also the Chaos Space Marines. These are Space Marines who were once loyal to the Imperium but now serve the ruinous powers of the Chaos. Each Chaos God has their own factions of Space Marines with their own chapters dedicated to spreading chaos and destruction across the galaxy. Now, let's talk about the Xenos, the heretical alien races that are a scourge on our human empire and will be eradicated in the name of the Emperor. The first sub-faction I want to cover are the Tyranids. They're probably the most popular Xeno faction at the moment, largely thanks to Space Marine 2. The Tyranids are a hive-mind alien race that devours all biological material to feed their endless swarms. They are an ever-evolving force of nature, one of the most dangerous threats to the galaxy. Their sole purpose is to consume all living matter to fuel their continuous evolution, leaving behind nothing but barren, lifeless worlds in their wake. Unlike other factions, the Tyranids have no culture, no society, and no individual personalities. Every creature in the swarm is an extension of the hive mind's will. There is still much unknown about the Tyranids as they originated from outside the Milky Way. They traveled here with the purpose of eradication and consumption, and it's believed they may have even devoured countless galaxies before reaching ours. The Orcs are a brutal, primitive alien race that lives for war. They thrive on battle and violence, and they have a unique ability to make crude, yet surprisingly effective technology work simply through their belief that it will. Since we're on the subject of Xeno Factions, you'll start to notice a trend. Many factions in Warhammer 40K have parallels to Warhammer Fantasy. So, Orcs in space. The Orcs are one of the most dangerous and chaotic factions in the galaxy. They pose a massive threat to their ability to regenerate, reproduce rapidly, and form massive wogs. Essentially war bands that can sweep across entire star systems. The thing is, Orcs fight purely for the love of it. There's no grand strategy, just the joy of battle, and that's what makes them so terrifying. The Eldar or Aldari are essentially the space elves of the 40K universe. They are an ancient, dying race that once ruled the galaxy but were nearly destroyed by their own hubris. Remember when I mentioned that Slaanesh was created through a giant blood orgy? Well, we have the Aldari to thank for that. The Aldari were specifically created by the Old Ones, and they are a powerful race with almost every member having Psyker potential. However, their main struggle now is to simply survive, as they are constantly targeted by other factions and hunted by the Chaos God Slaanesh, who has a particular thirst for their souls. The Tau Empire are a young but rapidly expanding faction that relies on advanced technology, teamwork, and a collectivist philosophy known as the Greater Good. Their sophisticated weapons, battle suits, and vehicles give them a distinct advantage in long-range warfare. Unlike many other factions in the 40K universe, the Tau aren't driven by religious zeal, brutality, or chaos. They prefer diplomacy and cooperation when possible. They are also unique in that they consist of multiple alien races working together under the banner of the Greater Good.
On your word,
Now that we've talked about the youngest faction, let's shift to the oldest, the Necrons. The Necrons are an ancient race that existed during the time of the Old Ones and even went to war against them, which, by the way, didn't go well for them. Once a living race, they transferred their consciousness into robotic bodies to gain immortality. After their war with the Old Ones, the Necrons went into stasis, entering an endless slumber to wait for the right time to reclaim the galaxy. About 10,000 years ago, they began awakening and immediately resumed their quest for dominance. But of course, humanity and the Emperor had something to say about that.
His angels.
Finally, we have the Leagues of Votan, the Space Dwarfs of 40K. These expert miners, pragmatic traders, and resilient warriors wield advanced technology lost to the Imperium. They are guided by mysterious ancient machine entities known as the Votan, which help direct their society. To conclude this part, I want to reiterate that these aren't all the factions, but I do feel like these are the more important ones, or at least the most popular.
Part 3. The creation of the Astartes.
For our last and final part, it seems only fitting to go over how the Astartes are created. Space Marines are by far the most recognized and popular figures from the Warhammer universe. Even people with zero knowledge of the lore or games will likely recognize them, this being the reason I've focused more on them than other areas. Space Marines are such an iconic part of the 40K universe that, like it or not, they're the face of the universe. And listen, if you're not a fan of Space Marines, feel free to comment. I won't report you to the Emperor or anything. The Adeptus Astartes are created through a process known as gene seed implantation, which is essentially genetic material that transforms a human into a Space Marine. But before we dive into that process, let's talk about how these humans are selected to begin the grueling process. As I mentioned earlier, each chapter of Space Marines has its own culture, homeworld, and this applies to their recruitment methods as well. Every chapter has specific planets, often harsh and war-torn, where they draw their potential candidates. These worlds breed fierce warriors who are already accustomed to survival in some of the most brutal environments imaginable. To be chosen for the trials is a huge honor for a family, and in some cases the families of the aspirants receive special treatment for their son's selection. The process varies by chapters, but there are common steps. Candidates or aspirants are usually selected from the strongest and most resilient populations in the galaxy, and they're often between the ages of 10 and 15. It's important to note that all aspirants are male, as the genetic process cannot be survived by females. The trials are brutal and most aspirants will die, whether from the extreme conditions of the trials themselves or during the gene seed implantation process. Before an aspirant can undergo genetic modification, there's one final test, their genetic compatibility. Only a small fraction of humanity is compatible with the gene seed. If their body rejects it, they don't survive, further reducing the number of successful candidates. The gene seed will include 19 specialized organs that are implemented in phases over various years to turn an initiate into a full-fledged Space Marine. The first is the secondary heart, which increases blood flow and oxygen distribution. If the primary heart is damaged, the secondary heart can take over, ensuring the Space Marine stays alive and stays longer in battle. The osmodula alters the structure of the skeleton, reinforcing bone density and growth. This gives the Space Marines their giant size and superhuman resilience. The biscopia is an organ that dramatically increases muscle mass and strength. It works together with the modified skeleton to give Space Marines their superhuman strength. The hemastomen modifies the Space Marines' blood to increase oxygen and nutrient efficiency. It ensures that they can operate in low oxygen environments and enhances their stamina. The Laramen's organ accelerates the healing process. This is what allows Space Marines to take wound after wound and still stay in the fight, wounds that would obviously kill normal humans. The catalepsian node allows a Space Marine to function without sleep, essentially. The preomner is a specialized organ that acts as a pre-digestive stomach, neutralizing poisons and toxins in the food and drink. It can allow Space Marines to eat food inorganic to regular humans. The omophagia implantation, which is personally one of the coolest I think, gives Space Marines the ability to absorb memories and knowledge from the flesh of other creatures. By eating the flesh of an enemy, a Marine can gain information about them such as language, tactics, or memories. The multi-lung adds a third lung to the Marines' bodies, allowing them to breathe in low oxygen or toxic environments. It also enables survival in atmospheres that would suffocate normal humans. The oculobe enhances the Marines' eyesight, allowing them to see in low light conditions and granting superior visual acuity. Lyman's ear enhances a Space Marine's hearing, so it gives them super hearing and protects against sonic sounds. The Susan membrane allows a Marine to enter a suspended animation state where they can remain alive and conscious for years without food, water, or air. This is especially useful for surviving severe injuries or even when awaiting rescue. The melanchrome is an implant that regulates the Marine's skin pigmentation in defense to radiation. The elotic kidney filters toxins and poisons from the blood much more efficiently than a normal kidney, protecting the Marine from poisons, chemicals, and other environmental hazards. The neuroglottis heightens the Marine's sense of taste to a superhuman level. A Marine can identify poisons or contaminants just by the taste and can track prey by tasting the air or the ground. The mucranoid allows a Space Marine to secrete a protective film of mucus that coats their skin. This makes the Marine immune to extreme temperatures, dry conditions, or even exposure to vacuum for short periods. The Becher's gland gives the Marine the ability to produce a corrosive acid in their saliva. They can use this acid to chew through restraints or even use it as a weapon in close combat, spitting acid at enemies. The progenoid glands are crucial for the future of the chapter since Space Marines cannot procreate. Located in the neck and chest, these glands produce new gene seeds which can be harvested after a Marine's death or at maturity to create new Space Marines. The final implant, the black carapace, is surgically implanted beneath the skin and connects directly to the Marine's nervous system. It allows a Space Marine to interface with their power armor, giving them full control over the suit's systems as if it were a part of their own body. When you lay out each specific gene seed transformation, you start to fully realize the power the Astartes carry around in their body, and why the recruitment and training process is so incredibly dangerous and grueling. Again, being a great example of the term the Grimdark. Hello my brothers and sisters of the Imperium. Firstly, just wanted to show appreciation to anyone who spent some time watching this video today. I know I say this every time, but it really doesn't mean a lot to me, so thank you. This video was honestly unplanned. When me and my buddy were playing through the Space Marine 2 campaign, he had really wanted to get into the lore, but he started feeling super overwhelmed by the sheer volume and just information of 40K. So this kind of sparked the idea that maybe I can make a video that would almost give people like a study guide or a table of contents. So, you know, when they watch Lutein's 7,000 hours of lore videos he has, they wouldn't be super lost or overwhelmed. I do have some more vids in the works, with one even going into the deep abyss of the Tyranids, but again, thank you guys. Noble out.